Hey guys, it's Marie from Asian Boss. The global COVID-19 pandemic is still going on, and a lot of us are in self-quarantine, whether it be voluntary or by government recommendation. Some countries, however, are under strict authorization to stay at home or face arrest. One of the strictest lockdowns is taking place right now in the Philippines, where there are police patrolling every corner and rumors of martial law. There has been a lot of international media attention on the Philippines, with reports saying somebody even got shot for breaking the quarantine rules. To get to the bottom of how strict the quarantine policies are, we wanted to talk to someone from the Filipino government, and the Deputy Chief for Operations of the Philippine National Police, who's the third highest ranked officer within the National Police, agreed to be interviewed by Asian Boss. This is the first time that anyone from the Filipino National Police talked to a foreign media, so we hope you watch the video till the end to get a different perspective you wouldn't be able to get elsewhere. This is how the interview went. Maraming salamat po sa inyong oras sa pag-isama nyo ngayon sa amin. The reason why we wanted to talk to you today is because we understand that the Philippines is still under lockdown as we speak, and that you have one of the most important and highest positions at the Philippine National Police. Is that right?
Thank you for this opportunity, Marie. But I would just like to point out that we are not using the word lockdown here in the Philippines to contain the spread of the coronavirus, since it connotes something that is harsh and would only stir fear among our people. The Filipinos are already scared of this pandemic, so the government is cautious in using words and terminology. So we prefer to use this as community quarantine.
Unang-una po sa lahat, pwede po ninyong ipakilala kung ano po ang inyong posisyon at mga responsibilidad sa PNP?
Well, I am the Deputy Chief for Operations of the Philippine National Police. I am the number 3 in the hierarchy of the Philippine National Police. And at the same time, the commander of the Joint Task Force COVID Shield, which is the government's enforcement arm in the fight against COVID-19. As the task force commander, I am in charge of supervising the implementation of strict health protocols crafted by our experts, such as mandatory wearing of face masks whenever people go out of their homes, observance of physical distancing, and restricting the necessary travel of our people. We have at least, around 110 million Filipinos nationwide, and we have 205,000 police personnel.
You took the helm as Deputy Chief of Operations on January 2020, which is only a few months ago, right? So when you came on board, did you ever anticipate anything like COVID-19 happening in the Philippines?
Assessing the current situation across the globe, nobody seems to expect this to happen this quick. But when news about of this was happening in Wuhan, China, already making headlines, our Commander-in-Chief, President Duterte, has already instructed us to prepare for the worst-case scenarios, noting the proximity of the Philippines to China. This is the reason why police and military personnel were rapidly and widely deployed to man the quarantine control points in Metro Manila on March 15, and in Luzon the following 2 days, and across the country in the succeeding days.
Sa inyong pananaw bilang high-ranked na PNP officer, how did COVID-19 actually impact the Philippines?
If you look into this socio-economic perspective, I believe that this is worse than the combined yearly natural calamities that regularly hit our country. Most of our people suddenly found themselves jobless, incomeless, and totally dependent from the government's food and cash assistance. But if you were look into this in the standpoint of peace and order, there has been a significant decrease in the crime volume, or 60% reduction in more than 22 months on the implementation of this quarantine rule, if we're going to compare this with the last 2 months before the implementation of the community quarantine. It is noteworthy to mention, however, that despite the financial hardship that our people have been experiencing, we have not recorded any single case of looting, and we attribute this to the planning and foresight of our crisis managers, as well as the cooperation and understanding of our people.
Meron po tayong global audience watching right now who's very curious about how the Philippines is actually handling the quarantine in response to the COVID-19. So it's really great to hear from someone like you directly to get the first-hand account. So could you explain to us what exactly are the current lockdown restrictions that are in place?
Well, we started actually with the ECQ in March, as March 17. ECQ is the enhanced community quarantine, and MECQ is modified enhanced community quarantine. But the difference between the ECQ and the modified ECQ is that in ECQ, there are only few establishments that are permitted to operate. But in the modified ECQ, we loosened a bit, and more establishments were allowed. So which means that it is more challenging for the Philippine National Police, considering that more establishments are now operating, and consequently, more persons or vehicles are now outside. And these are the things that we have to check in order to ensure that only authorized persons are allowed to be outside of their residence.
What was the direction and exact orders you received from President Duterte on how to actually implement the lockdown?
Well, basically, we are implementing the guidelines given to us by the Interagency Task Force through the conduct of our quarantine control points or checkpoints. So first, we have to know which establishments are permitted to operate, then who are the people who are members of the workforce of this establishment. And through our checkpoint, we have to find out whether those who are passing through our checkpoints are authorized or not. And aside from that, we have police visibility on areas which are allowed to operate. And one significant interventions that we have implemented is through the implementation of curfew, which are initiated by the different local government units nationwide.
So what does this mean for the average citizens of Manila? Are they allowed to go outside? What if they have to buy essential items like food, groceries, or what if they have to go to the hospital? Is there any system you implemented to help people in this situation?
Our national and local government officials also issued quarantine passes in order for one member of the household to be allowed to buy food and other essential items for their family, but strictly during a particular period of time and place. Well, most of these quarantine passes actually are limited to the place where they are given. So we discourage quarantine pass holders to cross borders, and instead they're advised to buy the essential items only and within their respective communities.
Ano po ang mga pinakamalaking challenge para sa police force when it comes to enforcing this lockdown?
Well, actually, our main challenge is actually to prevent the spread of the virus, to save as many Filipinos from being infected, and by restricting the necessary movement of these people and forcing them to follow the health and community quarantine protocols. As you have seen, since the start of our enforcement, it started from around 8,000 violations. But recently, with the more police personnel and soldiers being deployed in the different areas prone to be violated on physical distancing, it reduced to less than 1,000 violations. So right now, what we're doing is to accost them, but most of them are just being warned. And for those who are hard-headed and resisting and disobeying our police personnel, they're the one being arrested, and appropriate charges are being filed against them.
But is the dense population also one of the challenges that the police
Yes. Well, of course, that is true. The population is one of the challenges, but we have to work with it. All of these constraints and other limitations are being considered, but still we have that objective to attain. That is why we have to enforce what needs to be implemented, so as for us not to waste what we have started for the past 2 months or so.
What's the police protocol and official response supposed to be if you see someone disobeying the quarantine rules?
Well, while the implementation of the quarantine measure really is that strict, but you see, we really have to be compassionate. So in most of the cases, we leave this up to our ground commanders to deal with the violators in case-to-case basis. For example, nobody in his right mind would arrest a senior citizen who just wants to buy his maintenance medicine. So, or, to go out to buy milk for his hungry baby.
So are you allowed to use force if ever?
Well, the use of reasonable force is always the last resort, depending on the situation on the ground. At the course of the implementation of the quarantine rules, we come up with basic precepts or protocols which we constantly remind to both our men and the public to avoid unnecessary confrontation. For the public, the rule is that one, you should obey the quarantine rules, and two, obey the people or respect the authorities enforcing them. And for our men, the rule is that for them to exercise maximum tolerance and respect human rights at all costs.
Recently, there's been a news that someone actually got shot by the police. Are you in a position to explain what exactly happened there or what actually led to that situation?
Well, there was an incident that happened in one of the checkpoints implementing our quarantine guidelines, but please understand that I cannot discuss it with you since the matter was already referred to our judicial authorities.
I see. So you're just not allowed to talk about it, or?
Well, since it's now being investigated, I believe that here in the Philippines, so we cannot just talk the merits of the case since it is now being investigated.
The numbers we have are that over 180,000 people have been cited for quarantine violations and that over 50,000 people have been arrested. Are these numbers correct?
Based on our latest data as of May 25, or on the 70th day since the community quarantine has started, there are more than 182,000 violators recorded from March 17. Of this figure, more than 107,000 were warned, around 20,000 were fined, and almost 55,000 were arrested.
These numbers are actually believed to be the highest in the world. Sa tingin niyo po, bakit po maraming mga tao na aaresto sa Pilipinas?
Well, the number of arrests only represents 30% of the number of recorded violators. Most of those arrested are repeat offenders, those who respect are officers on the ground, and those who went out for their house just for the fun of it. These arrests are necessary in order to send a stern statement to the public that national government is determined to enforce the law because what is at stake is the public health, which is a serious issue. Of course, other countries have their own laws, but you see, in this kind of pandemic, we have to be strict on the laws pertaining to quarantine regulations. Otherwise, it is our life which is at stake. That is why we really have to do this. The economy is hurting. We have sacrificed a lot. So it is just but proper that we should implement to the strict extent the law so that we can attain the objective of what we are doing with all the sacrifices that we are experiencing.
President Duterte repeatedly mentioned that he would enforce martial law in the country if necessary. Sa tingin niyo po, matuloy ba talaga ang itong martial law sa Pilipinas?
You know, I believe that you have to understand the context on why the President Duterte mentioned that. During that time, the number of violators continues to rise despite our repeated appeal, despite our repeated explanation on how serious the threat of coronavirus is. And despite our repeated warnings, well, as the father of the nation, we all feel the frustration and the fire of our president, and we understand why he had to say and do something as a way of imposing discipline to his children. And it worked. Before, the daily average of quarantine violators is as high as 3,800, but when more soldiers and members of the police elite force were deployed in the streets of the areas with high number of violators, there was a steep drop recorded of quarantine violators since April 23, or 1 or 2 days after deployment, and the number of violators has never reached the 2,000 mark or even much less. Our president is smart. He certainly knows the law. So from the start, we do not believe that he would declare martial law with regard to this matter.
I think what viewers outside might be very curious about is maybe in their countries they might have lockdown situation as well, but it's not like there's a lot of soldiers, military people on the streets who are patrolling. But why does it have to be so strict in the Philippines in particular in comparison to other countries?
You know, other countries have their own way of doing things. And the Philippines, it is the life of the Filipinos that is at stake. So, we are sacrificing, this quarantine is not good for everyone, but we have to do this in order for us not to have this pandemic come to worse. That is why in our minds, in the law enforcement side, it has to be implemented strictly. So it will be followed, and the goals and objectives of this program will be attained.
So I think, but everyone is kind of in the same boat because other countries also pretty much have the same problem with the COVID-19. So I think there's still a difference in how different countries react to it. And I'm still like curious why the Philippines is stricter in comparison to the other countries, if it's the same problem in the end.
Well, if we're not stricter, probably we have also casualties going to thousands, you see. So right now we have, well, it reached around 800, something like that. But if we were not strict on the implementation, probably it would be tens of thousands that were already dead because of this pandemic.
Do you actually know how bad the coronavirus situation is in the Philippines right now?
Well, right now we have, I believe, some 14,000 were infected, and around 800, if not mistaken, died. But if we did not implement these strict quarantine procedures, probably that could be higher. So that is why we have to do this, and we have to continue doing this in order not to waste the sacrifices and difficulties and hardships that we have been doing for this quarantine program.
Critics and some Western media often accuse the Filipino government of being too highly militarized and excessive in their quarantine restrictions. How do you respond to these accusations as someone who's actually on the ground enforcing these laws?
Well, a few days ago, experts from the Philippine Staff University released the result of a study which states that the strict implementation of this enhanced community quarantine has been critical in reducing transmission and deaths due to the coronavirus. We believe that this is a vindication on the part of the President and his crisis managers, a vindication on the part of law enforcers, and a solid testament that we did the right thing amid unfair criticisms of militarized approach in fighting this virus. The irony in these unfair allegations with the Western media is that it is the West where cases of coronavirus infection are high. And here in the Philippines, we are doing this because we want to save lives, we want to save people. So I believe that all what we're doing here is in consonance with the objective of this government to save people. And we will continue on doing this as long as that we believe that is appropriate to attain our goals and objectives.
In the end, what's your biggest priority as one of the key people at the Philippine National Police? And what is your long-term mission?
Well, the biggest priority of the government, which I am part of, is to contain the spread of the coronavirus and save many Filipinos from infection, especially now that we are gradually reopening our economy and gradually shifts to the so-called new normal. So in terms of the long-term mission, our Commander-in-Chief, our President, is committed to defend the country from this unforeseen enemy and determined to save as many Filipinos from being infected by this fatal disease. On our part, we will continue to focus on our mission by acting as if it is always the day one of the pandemic in the country until such time that the vaccine is discovered and everything is normalized.
Is there anything you want to tell the Western audience or maybe even Western media who portray the way of how the Philippines is tackling this situation? Is there any message you want to tell them?
Well, it's not very easy for our government, to plan all of these things that we're doing right now. So it's a balancing act on the economy versus the health of the Filipino people. And that's why we have this crisis management through the interagency task force to plan for it and make the necessary recommendation. And as long as they come up with a decision based on science and based on the data that we have for the past days, weeks, and months, we will fully support this one in order to implement this one. And we need really the cooperation support of each and every Filipinos here in the Philippines in order for us to heal as one and win this war. So we need each and everyone's cooperation and support on this fight.
Is there maybe anything else you would like to get out there where you think the Philippine National Police might be misunderstood and you just want to clarify a few things, because I think on social media a lot of people are actually blaming the police, but what's your response to that?
I think that the people must know that the law enforcement officers, particularly the Philippine National Police, is just implementing the guidelines being given by the policymakers or the interagency task force on the management of the emerging infectious diseases here in the Philippines. The Philippine National Police, being the front line of this campaign, is actually very much vulnerable on the infection. We are not exempted. In fact, in our organization, so far, more than 270 among our personnel are infected, and 4 died with this coronavirus. But still, while it is true that we cannot just see our family, and most of us have been out in the field and cannot go home, but still we have to do this job. And that is the essence of a public service. And what we need from the public is, not really the recognition, but for all of us to cooperate and support each other so that we can attain the objective of this quarantine and other program being implemented by our government.
International viewers, they would only get their news from big international news corporations, but they actually never hear from the law enforcers directly, just like you. And I think we are also the first international media to be able to interview you. So that's why we really appreciate that you were able to talk with us today and share your perspective.
Thank you, Marie, for having me.
We want to thank Lieutenant General Eleazar for sharing his insight. For us, it was interesting to hear directly from one of the highest government officials on this issue. But what did you guys think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. For more authentic insight into the latest news and social trends from Asia, be sure to subscribe to Asian Boss and download our free community app, which you can find in the description below. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay curious.